Hello and welcome to From Mrs. to Me, a podcast where you'll be inspired by courageous stories of strength and resilience told by women just like you who have been through the upheaval of divorce. This is their journey from Mrs. to Me, finding their true identity and creating a bold, beautiful life. I'm Crissy Freeman and I'm your host, a certified life coach and divorced mother of two. Join me each week as we explore real stories of divorce and what it takes to transform and live in alignment with the real you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the From Mrs. to Me podcast. I'm your host, Crissy Freeman, and today my next guest, Erin Berry, is a conscious relationship and intimacy coach. She specializes in helping women and couples reclaim, reconnect, redefine, and expand their idea of what healthy relating and intimacy can look like. She is a somatic and embodiment coach that believes the key to our healing is through the body. She loves to help women connect with their divine feminine nature and their unique sensual special sauce. I love that. She's here to debunk the myths and set the record straight about what your body is capable of and help you unleash it for yourself. She's passionate about this work because it was her own personal journey from living a pleasureless existence in the wrong relationship to living life on her terms with mind-blowing pleasure and healthy, deeply connected relationships. Welcome, Erin. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Well, as you know, we talk about transformation from Mrs. to Me on this podcast. So as someone who, as you describe, as being in a pleasureless relationship, how did you not only recognize this, but prioritize your own needs and take action to change it?
I mean, it was definitely a journey. It wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, I'm not happy in this. I mean, I think I did what most people do in those sorts of situations where I was coming up against what I was told I was supposed to be experiencing and what I was told I was supposed to do versus what I really wanted. I remember there being a day I woke up and thinking, I'll just wait till the kids are older. And I mean, my kids were young when I got divorced. And then realizing, but wait a minute, like my needs and my desires are just as important. Like, why am I putting off what I need for longer for them, right? Because also what I realized in hindsight is that kids are watching us. So they're seeing what like our relationships are and thinking that's what they're supposed to have. And so I'm super grateful that I think I just had that drive enough to know that eventually had the drive enough to know it took me a minute, to realize that really I needed to live by example. And ultimately that's why I left was like, I caught myself saying something to my daughter that was more of one of those do as I say, not as I do situations. And being
we all do that, right?
Right. And being like, wait a minute. No, I actually have to like show her what's possible.
Yes, I love that because really what we are doing is modeling behavior for our children. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes as moms is, we so innately want to protect them and shelter them and prevent them from feeling some of the pain of change or of divorce. And instead, what we're doing is we're making ourselves small. Mm-hmm. And they're seeing that, right? And so I love that you share that because I think there are so many women out there who are staying for their kids. And if that is the only reason, I find that that's the wrong one, right?
Yeah. I mean, I actually, when I was starting to think about exiting the relationship, I had this was such a gift. I had a few female friends that actually shared with me that they recognized that their parents' relationship was not good and they wished their parents would have split up. And that kind of gave me permission to be like, wait a minute. Yeah, I think this needs to end.
Yes. And as a child of divorce myself, it's funny, I forgot about that when I had my own kids, what
Yeah.
it was like, and saying, oh man, just the constant upheaval, the arguments, all the things, and just feeling like it was not a healthy relationship, but thinking that was normal because that's what I saw until the divorce. So, yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And the work you're doing now. So, one of the challenges that I think for women after divorce is this sort of who am I after divorce, right? And discovering that, and also pursuing your passion, pursuing what lights you up, whether that is a full-time thing, a part-time thing, a hobby. Can you share with our audience, how did you sort of overcome your fears around, whether that's financial insecurity or fears of being a single mom, and pursue your passion and create this business and a fulfilling life for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also a journey.
Yep.
Didn't wake up and say I'm worthy. I wish it were that easy. That's a lot of the work that I've personally done for myself and now teach other women how to do. And, really it was just a timing thing. I feel like almost once I said, okay, this relationship no longer works, I actually it opened up the possibilities, like to the point where I'm sure many people that listen to this podcast have had similar situations where it's like everything in my life blew up. But now looking back, it's like it was all working in my favor. It was all putting me on the course that I was supposed to be on. So as I started to untangle myself from my relationship, I started to get back in touch with the things that really brought me joy. So I was starting to lean back into dance. I was discovering live music. I was just really connecting with people that lit me up. So I think that was a part of my journey of figuring out like who I was authentically. At first, I thought, I'm like, look at my giant freak flag. I actually used that term. And
I
then I
love
had a
that.
friend, I had a friend that was like, I think you're just being authentic. And I was like, and some of what I enjoy is probably like a little like edgy or whatever, but it's like, no, actually, I was just stepping out of all of these boxes that I had confined myself to. So that was a part of it. I also lost my corporate job in the middle of my divorce. I mean, everything that could have happened. I moved, someone died on me. Like I had the full like experience.
Wow.
And what it did though is it created this how do I want to say this? It made me like really unattached from things that I thought had been important before. So, I mean, even just moving out of my marital home, like I did that in 4 hours one day, and I left behind everything. I took what was important. I took my kids, I took my Vitamix, and like a few pictures, and the rest of it was just like it didn't matter anymore. So I think there was like this sense of freedom there that also helped. And then, yeah, I just figured while I was writing this, I could see my corporate job was kind of like, it felt like I was on the Titanic and I was walking up it like very slowly. I was a recruiter and the company was laying off and not hiring. I mean, the writing was on the wall. So I took that as an opportunity to actually create my LLC and my business and lean in. And when I started my business, I actually wasn't doing coaching. I was in resistance to doing coaching, which is kind of funny. I was teaching yoga and retreats. And all these people kept showing up for me to teach what I was learning myself, which was this foundational stuff of loving yourself, accepting yourself, honoring yourself. So my journey has very much been like I needed to learn what I'm teaching and teaching what I needed to learn.
Yeah, it's so interesting how things just show up at the right time. If
Mm-hmm.
we are paying attention, a lot of us were so stuck in our head and the fear space after that we aren't seeing what's right in front of us. And so it's so beautiful that you were able to not only get those experiences of people coming to you, but to be open to seeing that, okay, this might be the next path for me. And I'm going to give it a try, because so many people see it and go, no, 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 no. I can't do this, for all the reasons that our mind tells us we can't do something. And lots of times that is the path. It's right there in front of us. And if we are open to it and we're not making a story about it and we take steps towards it, so many things show up. So I love that you not only saw it, but pursued it and took action towards it. And I think you touched upon, finding music and those other things. One of the things I love to talk about is what I call sort of the healing path to discovery. So it's discovering those things that have sort of always been there, but we didn't tap into them for whatever reason. And so I would love for you to share just a little bit more about your healing journey itself. How did you, because you talked about self-love, and how did you tap into that and identify what are those things for you that light you up, that give you joy and energy? And how did you discover those things?
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to just back up and address what I didn't before, which is that really there is always fear and resistance, and we always have to push through it, because any kind of healing journey happens in the discomfort, not the comfort.
Yes.
And so that's just, I can see my cat's shadow. He's cracking me up. He's coming up here to say hello.
Hello.
But anyways, and now he's gone. I just saw this little shadow. So, I think it was saying yes to a lot of things. It was pushing through that resistance, really to even be I feel like an entrepreneur, and especially as a single mom, solopreneur type, you kind of have to eat fear for breakfast. A lot of the work I do with the women I work with is around the nervous system and retraining it. So a lot of even the relational work is about proving to yourself that you're not going to die by doing whatever the thing, which is a little uncomfortable. And so I feel like I've just done a lot of that in my own life, where there's been this stretch of what's comfortable. And much of what I figured out I enjoyed was kind of pushing that edge for myself. So not putting myself in a stress cycle or something, but actually really leaning into things that were unknown to me. And so that was a big part of my healing journey. I had discovered a program. So when I was still married, I was also starting to do this work. So I think that happens for a lot of us, where I was doing yoga teacher trainings. I started going to retreats. It was actually a retreat that I had gotten so miserable and in so much pain that I was seeking, which I think happens for a lot of us.
Yes.
There's something that finally we're we can't stand this anymore. We have to go discover it for ourselves. And so that was a big part of what I was doing. And I think I actually grew myself out of the relationship, which tends to happen. We either grow together or we grow apart. And I know I've heard those sorts of programs, such as teacher trainings, will create divorce for some of the participants because they start to wake up to who they are. So I think it's just leaning into those things that really excite you, like you were saying, and light you up. So after I left, or really kind of in the midst of it, I found this program that was centered around Tantra, which is something I had always been interested in. It was something I had studied in one of my yoga teacher trainings. And the foundation of that was really looking at ourselves, of course. Really, that was my work after leaving my situation, was how do I not repeat this again? And what are we actually up to in relationship? And so it was, the journey itself was really foundational in looking at self. I went in thinking, I'm going to learn all this amazing intimacy stuff, but the intimacy that we create out in the world starts with ourselves. It's that emotional intimacy with ourselves. It's creating safety for ourselves. So a big part of my journey was healing within that container with myself, but also I was surrounded with other people who were very like-minded. And it started to open me up to these possibilities that I hadn't even known existed before the end of my relationship.
Well, you touched on so many things there, like writing things down because I'm like, yes,
Perfect.
that.
Yeah.
First I want to touch on the seeking piece because it's been a theme with almost everybody that I've talked to on this podcast when you talk about transformation is that seeking piece is all of a sudden you start sort of, it's like a banana, you just start peeling off these layers and uncovering these things that you love and you want to seek. Like for me, it was books. I started just getting all these books about healing, about relationships, about all these things. And then I ended up going to retreats, just like you said. And it was this one retreat that sort of opened everything up for me. And it was just like, yes, this is me. And it's that authenticity that you talked about. It's, I call it the inner weirdo because that's like me, but all the things that that make me uniquely me started to come out. And so I hear that all the time, these seeking, it starts with that. And it's your growth pattern, I think, and it's leaning into that discomfort, all those things that you talked about. But so I just wanted to highlight that for the audience because I think it starts there, and so when you start really pursuing those things that do light you up, like yoga training or things that interest you, all these other things start to open up. So I wanted to highlight that. But then you also touched on not repeating old patterns. And I think that's an important one. And I think a lot of women struggle after divorce with being alone because they think it's this, lonely, I don't want to be alone for the rest of my life. And depending on their age, it's this fear of, how am I ever going to find anyone again? I'm getting older. And so there becomes this need to sort of jump into that next relationship so quickly without doing that healing and really sort of discovering what it is that you want in the next relationship. And so if you were to give advice to women who are stuck in that space of, oh my God, I'm never going to find anyone again, and I don't want to be alone, what would you tell them?
I mean, I remember that phase very well. It actually hit me before my divorce. I think I stayed in my relationship for the wrong reasons. And that was definitely 1 year of that was, believing nobody. It's funny to even think about that now, that nobody would ever want me again. You know what I mean? But it's, it's a real thing. And even for myself, and I've kind of changed my mind about like a timeline per se, because everyone's healing is different. But I think it is so important to take time to yourself. And if you hear that statement and then you now just felt resistant, like it's probably even more important for you to take that time, because what we're doing in relationship until we do our healing work is we're repeating a pattern that has started way back in childhood, some need that was not met, no matter how amazing our caretakers were or wherever you got it from. If you've got trauma or anything like that, you are seeking people to help you complete this cycle. And so by jumping back in, I just heard this last week, like someone I know who jumped into a relationship is now getting divorced again because they didn't take that time. So even just recently, I ended what was probably, I think I shared with you, a more impactful connection for me than even my marriage was. And I consciously took about a year to really get my nervous system to a place where I felt secure and safe within myself before I related again. And then when I did go back out in the world and start that process, it was amazing what I attracted. It was a different level of person. So if you are if you're out of a relationship and jumping back in, the people you're relating with are always going to be where you're at. They're going to meet your level, right? So I think I shared with you, I met my previous partner right after divorce, and I was going to take 2 years off and I took one. That's why I was like, for me, I wish I would have taken that extra year. I think that would have been a big impact in who I attracted in. But but now the person that I'm relating with has only been out of relationship for a year and is perfect, right? Like he's done the healing he needs to do. So it's really about you feeling ready. And so that time is just, I can't say enough about it. It's just something I recommend. And not everybody needs it, but if you do, if you're seeking it from the place that you're talking about, which, like everything you said, I would label that as codependent. And most of us have codependent habits until we unwind them. If you're afraid of being alone, that is the wrong reason to be in relationship. Because actually, when you do, like now, I miss myself when I don't get enough time. Like the more time you spend with yourself, the more you enjoy that. Because what I firmly believe is that relationship is the cherry on top of this perfect, complete, whole relationship that you have with yourself. And so many people are trying to put a cherry on a pile of crap, just because we haven't done our work. So as you can tell, I feel very passionately about this.
I love that. Cherry on a pile of crap. I really like that. I'm quoting that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a little emoji with the little cherry on top. That's what I always see when I see that.
Well, and I think also, it's about learning. We're not, and not beating yourself up too, because I think we're going to make mistakes along the way. We are all learning through each experience. And, I was in a 19-year marriage and, I thought I had been doing the healing. I mean, I was out of that marriage way before it ended. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to get out and I'm ready. I am ready. And I did that too. I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a few years. It was about not quite a year and I met someone and it was the wrong relationship. And I wasn't healed to the point that I thought I needed to be. And so, but don't beat yourself up either, because it is a learning and we're growing from each experience. And you grew from that other relationship, right? And then you did some more healing around that, as did I. And then when it was time for this beautiful relationship to appear, it did. So it's a journey and it's continually evolving, and we're continually evolving and changing as we go through that process. So I also want to highlight, because you touched on this a couple of times too, is the people that you met along your journey, your growth journey, your discovery journey. And I talk about it a lot on this podcast and what it means to guests to find your village, those people that align with you, who you are authentically and support you. Can you tell me about how you found that village, is what I refer to it as, on this next journey after divorce?
I was just having a conversation with a fellow relationship coach last week about this, like how many people have come and gone from my life since my divorce. I think once you release something that major, it makes it easier to unattach from other people who are no longer serving you. And so one of the things, it goes along with what you were saying about your inner weirdo, which I was reflecting. I'm like, isn't that funny that we all think we're weirdos and freaks when we're just being authentic?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we're told to be this certain way, and when we're not, we think something's like so like odd about us, but actually, no, it's odd that everyone would be the same. So I just
yes, thank you.
Revisit that. But it ties into this because the more that you are loving and accepting yourself for who you actually are, you're going to attract those people to you, because we're all reflections for one another. So then, you end up with, and I've seen this time and time again in my own personal life and with my clients, the people who show up to reflect you are a better match.
Yes. I love that.
So often, I mean, I see this in relationship too, or people who are dating, just as a side note, if you're going back into the dating realm, like one of the things I talk about out on my dating site is like, don't wear a mask. Because so often people then they get into a relationship, they presented themselves in this way, they get into this relationship, and then all of a sudden, like, they're mad because the person doesn't even know who they are or like them for who they are, but you didn't show them that side. So the same goes with your friends and everyone else that you relate with. Like I've gotten to the point, and I actually just created this meme the other day that said, the more people you can get to reject you, the more time you save. And it's like a dating meme, but it's like, not
I love
everyone is
that.
going to like you, and you're not going to like everybody else. And it's a time suck. And I know this well. This has been part of my healing journey, but it's such a time suck to try and make that happen. So the
Yes.
way you find your tribe is by figuring out, or your village, as you said, is you're actually aligning with who you are first. The more you accept yourself, the more other people can do the same.
Yes, and they're drawn to you. It's just it just
Yes.
happens that way, and I experienced the same exact thing, and it's been amazing. You know, being divorced 5 years, all the evolution of sort of not only who I've become, but also who I now have in my life. You know, friends and my partner, and it's just so different as I start to show up as authentically me. And you're right. I love that you said that. We call ourselves weirdos, and and really we're just being who we are, and that's a beautiful thing. So I don't know why we do that, but I wish everybody would access their weirdo.
Yeah.
But you talk in your bio, I really want to touch on this because I loved it, is you talk in your bio about helping women connect with their divine feminine nature and their unique, quote, sensual special sauce. Can you tell the audience more about what this sensual special sauce is that you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, one of my favorite things to speak to and work with is the divine feminine, mostly because most women are a bit disconnected from it, maybe not as much as they think they are. I think actually what happens is we're so over masculinized in our society that it's overshadowed. And so actually a lot of what I work with women around is that they've kind of emasculated their inner masculine trying to become more feminine, and that never works. And so we could do a whole other podcast on polarity. It's one of my favorite topics, but in a nutshell, the divine feminine is this flowy, receptive being that is also very wild and free. And I think that actually goes back into like connecting with your inner weirdo, is like when you accept these free flowing things that maybe you've been taught and told by society or whoever, they're not okay. And that ties into our sensuality. And I think just in a general sense, society has also done a really fabulous job of telling us how things are supposed to look when it comes to our sexuality, our pleasure, our sensuality. And for women, a lot of that has been that your pleasure is for somebody else, or that it's wrong to live from a pleasure-filled place. And one of my biggest awarenesses over the year, sensuality is one of my favorite things to talk about and teach as well, is that it doesn't look a certain way. So it's about your inner experience, as is pleasure. It's through the body. Like you can't think your way into it. And so a lot of times people will feel very disconnected from this, especially after a relationship where it feels like that passion has kind of been disconnected. And so a really wonderful hack for your audience is to think of a time when they did feel sensual and they felt juicy in their body. And that's a really good way to get back to it. But it's not going to look the same for you as it does for me. And that's our special sauce. And that's actually like the juiciest thing that attracts people to us ultimately, is how we're showing up by being connected to our physical bodies in this very sensual way. So dance, going back to that, is one of my absolute favorite ways to express sensuality. But we're all different, even in what senses light us up. So I've been speaking for my networking group a lot, and I talk about pleasure, and it's about evoking all the senses and figuring out, like, is it chocolate? That's definitely one of mine. Is it eye candy? Is it like something that's visually pleasing to you? Or is it something that feels nice on your skin, or the way something smells or tastes or sounds? So it's actually playing with all of the senses and figuring out what works for you, and also how you want to express it, and owning that. That's part of authenticity as well.
Yeah. Oh, this brought me back to this exercise that I did, like not long after my divorce. I ended up getting a coach. And one of the things, that was one of the areas I was really stuck, was expressing my sensuality, really tapping into just getting comfortable with my body. And I realized that in my marriage, I had shut that down, completely shut it down. And I don't know if it was once I became a mom or what, there was a big shift at one point in my life where I became completely detached from that. And so I remember she had given me this exercise to try. And she said, because I love music too, I absolutely love it. I love to move my body to it and always have loved to dance. And so she said, okay, I want you to get the sexiest lingerie that you can get. And I want you to put it on your body. And I want you to just walk around your house when your kids aren't around, or your bedroom or whatever. I want you to look at yourself. And then I want you to play the music that you love. And I want you to dance. I want you to get really comfortable. It was the most amazing experience. And I just remember after that, I finally started doing more to get comfortable with my body. I mean, not to get too in depth, but I hadn't even touched my body in my entire life. I thought it was something you don't do. It was like the bad girl thing to do that. And so I started exploring, and I was like, oh my God, I have been missing out on this my entire life.
Yeah.
And so now, in my relationship I have now that is amazing, I'm able to ask for those things. I'm able to know what are those things that make me feel sexy, that, make me really tap into that feminine energy. And it's amazing. So I love this work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, I have a whole group dedicated to women reclaiming their pleasure for themselves, like regardless of, and most of them are married. It's not just something you do when you're single. It is I feel a huge part of self-care, self-honoring, and self-love. I mean, and as you point out, a lot of what we do in the group is question like why we have these thoughts about why things are wrong, because we all have them around our pleasure and sexuality.
Yes, we do. And I think, it goes back to sort of all these different identities and roles that we play throughout our life, right? It's, we're a daughter, and then we're a wife, and then we're a mother. And we lose ourselves in that whole journey and process. And it's because of what you said, it's because of what society tells us, or our parents tell us, or the environment tells us. And we lose sight of that. And I think that is what's great about not just divorce, but I think change in general. When you go through these different changes, whether it's empty nest, whether it's divorce, whether it's grief, whatever it might be, or just aging, it becomes an opportunity to actually go in. And I think it's such a beautiful thing, is to really, for the first time in your life, discover who you are. And part of that is your sensuality. And so as women, I think we push that down for too long. And then when we finally access it, it's like opening this gate, and you're like, oh, this is such an amazing part of my life I haven't tapped into. So I think that's amazing. So before we go, one of the things, and you talked about it a little bit, but I always ask my guests to just wrap up the show, is what does authenticity mean to you in your life?
Oh, wow. I'm like, I haven't answered that question in so long. It's hard to it's just who I am now. You know what I mean? But I think it really is like going back to some of what I was saying earlier. It's really looking at all the parts of you and being willing to accept all of them. because none of them are wrong. Like, even if it feels like something is off, it was serving a purpose at some point in your life. Like, I do a lot of work with like lost pieces of people. And I mean, those are still a part of you. And everything that has shaped you is something to be grateful for. Like, even if it was hard, you know what I mean? I think so often we shun these other parts of ourselves that we don't identify with anymore, but we wouldn't be who we are and having the experience that we're having right now without having had those experiences. And it also is about tapping in. It's about tapping into all the things that light you up. Like, really, that's a big part of the work that I've done personally and teach other people to do. Is, I think one of my favorite words and ways of being is alive, being alive, aliveness. Like, the more that you feel keyed in and tapped in, that's kind of your guide to your authenticity. The things that make you feel that way are authentic to you. And authenticity, it's kind of funny. I put it in a box. I was talking about the boxes that were put in. When I first started this work, I went to a healer and she's like, you actually have an authenticity box. And I'm like, that's funny. But that's how I knew how to do things back then. But it's about actually like stepping outside of the boxes and actually just allowing yourself to be who you truly are.
Yes.
It's a journey.
It is a journey.
Yeah.
It is a journey. And I love that you said it's where you feel alive. Mm-hmm. And, you know, those moments and tapping into those moments, because, you know, one of the things that I've uncovered is how much nature makes me feel alive.
Well, me too.
Like, oh my gosh, first thing in the morning as the day is waking up and just sitting outside and listening to it and just fully submerging myself in all of that that's around me in nature. It makes me feel so alive. And so, you know, there's so many things like that. And it sounds like that nature does that for you as well. And finding that, it is a journey, but it's so worth it. So thank you, Erin, for being here. I feel like I could continue to talk to you for hours, but if our audience wants to find you, learn more about the work that you're doing, all this great work with women and others, how can they do that?
Yeah, I have everything is the same. So it's Erin Berry Bliss. So my website is erinberrybliss.com. My Facebook is Erin Berry Bliss, and then Instagram is @ErinBerryBliss. And I do have a free Facebook group called Pleasure Seekers. So if the sensuality and pleasure stuff really interests you, that's a really great, safe space to explore it. But yeah, I would love to connect with anyone that's interested in learning more about what I do.
I love that. And I may be joining that Facebook group after today.
Yeah.
So Erin's information will also be included in the show notes. Thank you so much for Erin for being here. I've so enjoyed our conversation. And for those of you listening, if you are interested in joining the From Mrs. to Me community, you can find us on Facebook at From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce, where you'll find some additional tips and tools. And I go live once a week. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a rating, and provide your comments so we can keep this going. And remember, as I always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So keep doing that inner work, and I'll see you here next time. I hope you enjoyed another episode of From Mrs. to Me, real life stories of real women and their journey of transformation after divorce. I'm Crissy Freeman, and if you like this episode, please drop a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a story to share? Are you ready to inspire other women on their journey through divorce? If so, find me on Instagram at From Mrs. to Me. For more tools and resources on creating your path to transformation after divorce, follow my community on Facebook, From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce.